The strange part about banking is this: the same institution can treat one person like a problem and another like a prize, even when the difference starts with just a few numbers on a screen. Why does a bank charge you faster when you're under pressure, then become oddly helpful once you're already stable? And at what point do fees turn into perks and scripts turn into names? This isn't really a story about money looking impressive. It's a story about how banks read signals, how those signals change your treatment, and where the system quietly starts working with you instead of against you. Banks don't evaluate you like a friend, and not even exactly like a biography. They mostly evaluate patterns, balance behavior, income rhythm, product usage, and how expensive or profitable your account is to maintain. From the bank side, one account creates exceptions, support costs, and tiny margins. Another account brings stable balances, future lending potential, and a relationship worth protecting. That's the lens behind almost everything you're about to see. That's why two people can use the same app, the same logo, the same branch, and still feel like they bank with completely different companies. One gets automation, the other gets attention. A simple way to understand this is walls and doors. At the lowest levels, you mostly meet walls, rules, fees, delays. Move up, and doors begin to appear. At the highest levels, the walls almost disappear. Important distinction: this is not about human worth, it's about account economics. Once you see that clearly, the strange behavior stops looking personal and starts looking predictable. So let's begin at the hardest end. This level feels physical. A card pause becomes a line behind you. A tiny shortage becomes heat in your chest. The bank doesn't experience that moment. You do. Here, the number itself is not the main story. -4 or -400 can trigger the same message from the system. Cover the gap, collect the fee, move on.
What makes this level so punishing is speed. Small purchases can multiply the pressure before you've even had time to react, and the account can feel like it's moving faster than your actual life. This is why people describe the experience as a low-balance penalty loop. The visible cost is the fee. The hidden cost is lost time, reduced flexibility, and how much harder it becomes to stabilize the next week. From the institution's angle, this level creates admin, alerts, and uncertainty. That doesn't make the experience fair, but it explains why compassion rarely shows up inside the first layer of automation. At this level, the metaphor is simple: wall, not door. You're interacting with policy before you're interacting with a person. The system is fast, fluid, and emotionally indifferent. What people outside this level often miss is the cognitive load. When every charge has to be timed, even ordinary errands start feeling strategic. That pressure is part of the cost.
At the bottom, the first win is not looking wealthy. It's ending the leak. Once the account can stay above zero, even briefly, the next layer starts to look very different. Now the account is positive, which feels better immediately, but the bank still doesn't see much relationship value. You're above the floor, yet still far below the line that changes your treatment. This is where indifference shows up as routine. You can end the month above zero and still pay a maintenance fee, simply because your balance never crosses the bank's preferred threshold. That creates a frustrating feeling. You pay to keep money there, while the institution uses pooled deposits to support lending and other profitable activity. The imbalance is small on paper, but emotionally obvious. Service here is not hostile, it's automated. Chatbots first, queues second, actual flexibility rarely. The message is quiet but clear. Your account is being processed, not actively cared for.
The hardest part of this level is that it can look stable from the outside, but the cushion is so thin that one surprise expense can change the tone of the entire week. This is the purest "you're just a number" layer. Not because someone dislikes you, but because nothing in the account yet forces the bank to compete for your attention. A common misunderstanding lives here. Positive doesn't automatically mean secure. What changes your experience is not technically being above zero, it's having enough room to absorb normal life without constant recalculation. The next shift happens when the bank starts seeing rhythm, not riches, rhythm. Predictable inflows tell the system something important. This account may become consistently useful. Stable income changes the picture fast.
The bank can now model behavior more confidently, which means your account stops looking like a service burden and starts looking like a revenue opportunity. This is where an invisible algorithm starts doing you a favor. Regular inflows reduce uncertainty, and lower uncertainty makes the bank more willing to remove friction and offer products. Notice what changes first. Some fees fade and offers begin to arrive, not because the bank suddenly became generous, but because the account now looks easier to monetize through future spending and borrowing. This can feel flattering, but here's the catch. The bank doesn't just want your stability, it wants your activity. Stable income plus regular spending is a very attractive combination. Service at this level becomes functional in the normal way most people imagine banking works. Not premium, not cold, just structured, predictable, and reasonably smooth when nothing unusual happens. That's the hidden twist here. Feeling chosen is not the same as having leverage. At this stage, you may be welcomed more warmly, but you're still mostly being welcomed into better monetization pathways. Used carefully, this level is powerful. Stable inflows can reduce fees, improve access, and create breathing room, but only if you protect the rhythm instead of letting offers quietly rewrite your habits. Because income gets you noticed, reserves change the negotiation. The next level begins when the bank sees not just motion through the account, but assets that can stay. Around this stage, the relationship starts changing in a more meaningful way. The bank no longer sees only transactions. It starts seeing a client who may be stable, disciplined, and worth keeping. That's the first taste of leverage. Once another institution might plausibly want your balances, your current bank becomes more interested in improving terms before you leave. Now the math starts feeling different. Lower rates, waived frictions, and better responses become possible not because you ask more politely, but because your departure would cost the bank more. This is one of the most revealing moments in banking. The same system that was rigid earlier can become surprisingly flexible once your account starts looking portable and worth defending. Emotionally, this level feels important because you begin to sense a reversal. The system is not purely punishing anymore. For the first time, it can respond to your choices. Quick question: which matters more to your treatment? Impressive income or dependable reserves? For many people, this is where the answer quietly flips. Why does this level matter so much? Because leverage is really the power to say no without harming your stability, and that changes every negotiation around you. Keep moving up, and the biggest upgrade is no longer the rate itself. It's the reduction of friction. The bank begins treating your time as something worth protecting.
By the preferred client range, the relationship becomes visibly different. Not magical, but noticeably smoother. The institution starts signaling that delays for you are more expensive than they used to be. One subtle but powerful change happens here. The bank gains a face. You may now know a person by name who can move a problem forward without reading from a script. Even the products feel different. The extras are less about tiny headline rewards and more about convenience, protection, and status signals that actually save time when used well. That's the real premium feature: compression of hassle. Problems that once meant menus, transfers, and repeated explanations can sometimes get solved through one direct contact. At this point, the bank is no longer just hoping you buy things. It is actively trying to protect a relationship that has become economically meaningful.
But here's an easy trap. Preferred treatment can look like progress, even when the deeper win is simpler. Fewer interruptions, better optionality, and less mental clutter. Don't confuse packaging with freedom. This is where many viewers realize the real luxury is not decoration, it's friction removed, time protected, small annoyances prevented before they grow into wasted days. Then another shift happens. You stop being approached mainly as a product user and start being approached as a planning problem the bank wants to organize around. Around this level, the relationship becomes more consultative. The bank is less focused on selling a single product and more focused on managing the complexity around your assets. You're no longer just purchasing banking products. You're being positioned as a client whose choices affect tax efficiency, investment coordination, family planning, and long-term control.
That integration matters because wealth problems are rarely isolated. A good answer in one area can create friction in another, unless someone is looking at the whole picture. Service here often feels almost suspiciously smooth if you've seen the lower levels. Problems that once required repetition can be handled in one move because the relationship is worth defending quickly. This is where many people finally see it. Paycheck size matters less than asset structure. A large income can impress neighbors. Organized assets change institutions. Of course, smoother service doesn't mean simpler life. The hidden cost of wealth is coordination. More moving parts can create more opportunities, but also more chances for expensive confusion. What success feels like here is surprisingly uncinematic. It feels like quiet options, more room to think, fewer rushed decisions, less dependence on one bad week not happening.
Keep climbing, and the bank stops merely serving you well. It starts organizing specialists around you. And that's where the rules begin to bend more visibly. At this stage, service becomes team-based. Instead of one banker trying to route everything, multiple specialists may work together because the account justifies more coordinated attention. This is a dramatic reversal from the first levels. Now the institution may compete for the right to lend to you because your broader relationship is valuable far beyond one product. Another change appears here: access. Not necessarily better outcomes by default, but more menus, more structures, and more options than the average website ever shows. Yes, the chairs are nicer, but the chair is not the point. The point is that more internal resources can now be justified around your needs, and that changes response speed. The deeper truth is not that rules vanish, it's that exceptions become easier to justify. When the economics are strong enough, rigidity becomes negotiable. There is a trade-off here that flashy content often skips. More access can produce better solutions, but it can also tempt people into over-optimizing details that matter less than clarity. And then you reach the uppermost layer, where the old metaphor breaks. There aren't many walls left at all, mostly invitations, relationships, and custom handling. At the ultra-wealth end, the model changes again. You are not simply using services. The relationship itself becomes strategically important to senior people inside the institution. Personalization becomes unusually deep. The banker may know family structures, charitable priorities, and timing preferences because retention here is not casual. Losing the relationship matters. Documentation and execution can move on an entirely different timeline, not because paperwork became easy, but because custom effort now has a clear financial justification. At this level, you can become a metric that affects internal careers. That may sound exaggerated until you remember how much revenue one consolidated relationship can represent over time. Here's the unsettling contrast. The same institution that felt blunt and punishing at the bottom can become astonishingly efficient at the top. The bank didn't gain a heart, the economics changed. That's the hidden variable most people miss. Wealth changes more than access. It changes who absorbs friction, who gets flexibility, and who is protected from institutional drag. So the map is clearer now. Early levels are mostly pressure, middle levels are leverage, highest levels are relationship, and that leads to the real lesson. Banks are not moral judges in this story. They are systems of incentives, risk models, service costs, and retention math. Understanding that makes the behavior less mysterious and more useful to decode. This is also where appearance and reality separate. Looking successful can attract attention socially. Being secure changes how institutions respond when life becomes inconvenient. Another overlooked truth: satisfaction often plateaus earlier than people expect, while freedom keeps increasing later through flexibility, optionality, and reduced dependence on a single fragile source of stability. If you take one practical lesson from this video, let it be this: the strongest position is usually not louder status. It's enough buffer to negotiate, enough consistency to stay calm, and enough discipline not to perform wealth. And to make this useful, let's turn the whole video into a simple roadmap. Not a status ladder to admire, but a decision tool for reducing friction and building more control over time. Step 1 is simple. Stop guessing how you're treated and measure it. Are you seeing repeated fees, slow support, and generic offers, or smoother service, better terms, and actual responsiveness. If the account is still leaking, ignore premium fantasies for now. First, reduce penalties, smooth due dates, and create even a modest buffer. The earliest win is stability, not image. Then, build stronger signals. Banks respond to patterns they can trust: steady inflow, cleaner history, retained assets, and fewer disruptions. Reliable signals open more doors than dramatic gestures ever will. Next, compare institutions intentionally. The right bank for a starter buffer is not always the right bank for growing assets, and the right bank for complexity is not always the cheapest one. And finally, aim for the level that matches your life, not maximum prestige, maximum alignment. The best banking setup is the one that reduces friction without pulling you into unnecessary complexity.
So the real story was never just how much money sits in an account. It was how the institution reads your stability, your portability, and your value as a long-term relationship. And that difference matters far beyond banking. Looking successful can impress people for a moment. Being secure changes the quality of your decisions, your time, and your ability to stay calm under pressure. Of course, the right setup depends on your goals, risk tolerance, family needs, and the kind of life you actually want. This is education to help you think clearly, not personal financial advice. If this helped you see banking more clearly, subscribe for more calm, practical finance explainers like this one. And if you want, tell me which level felt most familiar to you. Thanks for watching. In the next video, we'll look at a related question: what looks rich from the outside, and what actually creates freedom once the cameras are gone?